Good morning, everyone. This morning, we're here with another awesome intern and therapist, CP Haro. And CP is going to share so much of herself with us and answer those burning questions that we have for her. CP, would you mind introducing yourself to us?
Yeah, thanks, Katrica, for having me. I'm really excited to be a part of this project. So I appreciate you taking the time to make this space for all of us. So hi, everyone. My name is CP Haro. My pronouns are they, them, theirs, and I am a first year graduate student at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, attending the online Master's of Science in Social Work program with a route in clinical direct practice. And I am at New Counseling in Nashville, Tennessee, but I'm working remotely from Memphis. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much, CP. So we're diving right into the questions. So CP, for me, the prominent reason I wanted to become a therapist is to connect and support individuals on their path to emotional wholeness. So why are you a therapist and what attracted you to become one?
Great question. Why am I a therapist? I often ask myself that all the time in the reflection that I have daily, trying to reassess why I bring myself to this work and what calls me to it. So long story short, I love to teach. I really value seeing the spark in someone's eye or how their body becomes a little bit lighter and their breath becomes a little bit more sustained when they can settle into a truth that they have not been able to access themselves or a realization that they've been seeking for. And to be in that intimate space with a group of people or one-on-one is really enriching and something that I find a lot of value in, because I think that our lack of comprehensive education as a whole in the country that we live in and globally keeps us from engaging our agency and autonomy and the ability to make the choices that we want to make. And so therapy lends itself to be a more individualized place for learning and for rest and for growth. So that's the long story short is I find therapists to be some of the best teachers because they teach us to come home to ourselves and they just guide us along the way. And I think that I would like to think I'm really good at that. And then the other side of that coin is I have been in therapy since I was 12. I'm currently 28. And so that's a long time to be in the care of other clinicians, both in the social work field and the psych field. And I have been positively impacted by some of the most peaceful and intelligent and compassionate human beings who were able to hold space for me as a whole human. And I have been able to come home to myself and carve out spaces of validation, grief, celebration, curiosity within my own life, personally, and then within the lives of others, because I have been given the privilege and the gift of being with a therapist. And so I thought, I think I can do that. So I love to teach. I loved being in therapy. Why don't I try being a therapist? And so I have started this journey as of last fall, and I'm a year into it as far as academics are concerned. And so I'm a growing professional. I will be a learning living student always, and a learning living therapist always. And so I take a lot of pride in the work that I do because I've been a proud recipient of therapy. And I think that we need to destigmatize and remove the taboo from seeking mental health and emotional health, because it's a part of who we are just as much as going to the doctor to get your flu shot or going to the dentist to get your teeth cleaned. So I think it's a really vital part of how we live our lives. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, CP. So also for me, CP, a personal experience has shown me the significance of having one person that showcases empathy and creates a safe space. So for you, can you tell me how your life experience, and you kind of did there already, shaped your perspective and approach as a therapist?
Sure. So many good questions. So I would say that I've had to do a lot of deconstructing. I grew up in a household that wasn't always supportive, and it wasn't always enriching emotionally or mentally. And I didn't learn how to communicate very well. Of course, I'm still learning how to do that by reading and listening to others and actively participating and voicing what I need or what I want. And I find that my approach to therapy is a lot like how I approach myself. I am a consistent work in progress, not to seek perfection, but to seek understanding. And when I enter into a space with a client or a group of clients, if it's in group sessions, I always try to position myself as someone who's just seeking insight and understanding rather than positioning myself as someone who's like going to be hyper analytical or hypercritical or to objectify the person. What I want to do and what I try to do with myself is really get to the root of the cause of the feeling, the need, the desire, the grief, and hold space for whatever does come up. I also enter into therapeutic care with a lot of excitement and a lot of curiosity, because although many of my clients currently, and I'm sure those who I have the honor of caring for in the future, will share similar experiences or maybe diagnoses or concerns, like nobody goes through the same thing in the same way. So approaching depression, approaching anxiety, complex PTSD disorder, sex, gender, sexuality, all the things that make us who we are, it's not a monolith, and it's going to be so different depending on the person's background, their culture, where they were raised, where they live, what they like to do, and the access to resources that they have. So for me, like, I enter into a therapeutic space with a lot of excitement, a lot of curiosity, and wanting to just better understand how to lend support, or at least lend validation and affirmation and acknowledgement for the client or clients, because that's what I try to do in my everyday life when I'm not in the therapist chair or like in the space as a therapist. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for that, CP. That was awesome. I appreciate that for sure. So, CP, I'm a firm believer that we should never stop learning, growing, and evolving into better versions of ourselves. So, what work do you do to prepare yourself for client sessions? And what do you believe is necessary to refine your craft and remain an effective therapist?
Mm, yeah, I love that question. Well, as you can see, I have lots of books behind me. So I'm like a voracious reader. I love to read physical books, and I like to read or listen to audiobooks, podcasts. So I like to be an active learner and a passive learner. But first and foremost, like, I am a firm believer that to be a healthy therapist, to be a safe practitioner and therapist, you must be in therapy. I think that we as therapists can bring a lot of like projection, biases, shortcomings, and like residual trauma or our own narrative into the space with clients if we don't do the work outside of our session. And a part of doing the work is to be in therapy. And if you're not actively in therapy, then taking those skills and resources into your daily practice before you're with a client or clients to ensure that you're not having transference, you're not putting yourself in the center of the client's story or their care, or you're projecting what you wish would be reflected in your own life onto the client or clients. It's really important to be mindful that yes, we are full humans and we will make mistakes. We are not going to be perfect. We are going to empathize and like connect in ways that relate to our own story. However, like, our job that we've been invited to do and the responsibility we have to our clients is to remain as attentive to their needs based on all of the frameworks, the science, the methodology, in addition to doing that heart piece and the work. And a part of doing the work is like sitting with yourself in stillness or in community with others and really analyzing, like, am I going to this work with good intentions? What will my impact be? Do I have grace for myself as a clinician, a human, and therefore I can extend it to others? So I think it's really important that therapists build a community of their peers, whether you're in the same field or not, like social work, psychology, if you do families, couples, individuals. I think it's great to have a wonderful bounty of different people to connect with. In addition to connecting with peers and colleagues in your field, I think that supervision, lifelong supervision, and professional development is also really important, because you have that specific insight to who you are as a clinician, and you have that trustworthy bond between yourself and a supervisor who can maybe shed light and speak into things that you may not be aware of that you bring into practice or that you could grow into, and even to celebrate what you're doing really well with your client care and your community care. And then I think always like being intrinsically motivated to want to learn more. Like, I think that it's important to have a hunger to want to learn more about how we intervene on mental health and emotional health and wellness, how we can provide spaces that are more anti-oppressive, anti-racist, and trauma-informed, and what that really looks like outside of a book and like in practice, in session, or in communal care spaces. And so to sum that up, like in therapy, in supervision, in community with others in our field, in community with others outside of our therapeutic field, like our family, our neighbors, our friends. And then even in addition to that, like seeking out literature, articles, podcasts, media, webinars, trainings, to put yourself in spaces where you want to be a sponge and just soak it all in and learn, and then apply what works for you, while also being able to admit, like, I made a mistake. What can I learn from this? And celebrating, I did that really well. Like, this feels good to me as a provider. I want to share this with my clients. So that's a lot. And I know it sounds daunting, and I would encourage people, as I'm encouraging myself, to just do it like a bit at a time, and you'll definitely get there. Yeah.
Thank you for that, Kiki. So just moving on, we all have a level of innate bias. So what are some ways that you identify and deal with your own biases when working with a diverse client? And what work do you do to prevent it from affecting client sessions?
I keep a notebook at my desk, and when something gets kicked up, whether I'm in conversation with someone else, or I observe media, or I hear of something, or even have a thought, and I'm like, ew, that doesn't feel good, or ew, that doesn't sit right, or I always think, like, why am I so adverse to this subject, this person, this community, whatever it is? Like, what is the reason behind it? What is fueling that feeling of ick, or that feeling of ugh? And I know that those aren't really like articulate words, but it's more of a feeling of ugh. And so I will write that down, and I'll sit with that for a while, and I'll try to map it out on paper and connect it to where it comes from. And then, like, is this a truth, or is this a societal norm that doesn't serve me? Like, is this feeling of confusion or pushback true? Is it informed by honesty and respect and compassion, or is it informed by false narratives and things that I may not have a full understanding of yet? So is this just like a lack of education and ignorance, or is it a true feeling, a true response? So once I come to understand that, then I can say, like, okay, this is a bias that I have, or this is a bias I don't have, and I need to work through that. I need to acknowledge it. So what I do is I vocalize it with my supervisor, I vocalize it to my mentors, and I'll vocalize it with my peers, just being mindful of the share that I'm offering, and then saying, like, help me be accountable as I'm holding myself accountable, so that I don't bring this into our space as professionals and as colleagues, in addition to client spaces. And I will actively seek out checking in with myself when I'm with a client. There are clients that I currently have that bump up against biases that I have. And I am consistently taking note in a different notebook when I'm with clients, and being really mindful about my body and about my breath and about my thoughts of, like, why is this bumping up against you? Does it need to be about you, or do you need to reframe, refocus, and recenter on the client? And then after the session, I'll take time to debrief. I'll finish up client notes, I'll go to my own notes, and I'll reflect. So that's what I do beforehand and in session with a client. And then, of course, afterwards, I'll seek clarification from a mentor or a supervisor or my own therapist. And then to prepare for being in spaces with clients, I like to make sure that I'm honoring grace and thankfulness to the craft of therapy, the skill of therapy. I always thank my clients for re-inviting me back into the space with them and wanting to come back. Like, that's a really great sign too, that they're actively seeking healing or curiosity in relationship with me. And And then also like just having time to be still and to sit without distraction from phone, texting, computer, email. And I will typically like light a candle because candles help me feel centered and calm. Like there's one on right now during our interview. And it's really important to acknowledge and to be mindful that while we do our best to be the best versions of ourselves, we will always come with self-taught or societal taught norms that are very harmful, that are very oppressive, that can be traumatic and can be violent. And it's our responsibility to have the due diligence to undo those, to divest from systems of oppression and harm, to name them for what they are, and then like to pick up what you own and attend to it, and to release what you don't. And I think that's also part of being a therapist, is acknowledging that like we are still people in this field, helping people in this field. So
Thank you for that. Thank you. So, CP, although the field of mental health has expanded significantly, becoming more transparent and communicative subject than ever before, mental health concerns and treatment are on the rise. So, I personally feel a lot of mental health challenges are rooted in our disconnectedness from each other. What do you consider to be the leading causes of mental health issues today, and why?
I knew that you were going to ask me this question, and it's such a loaded question, which is great. So I appreciate it. What are the leading causes? I would have to say the taught obligation to others rather than to self. We are born into a world where we have very little ability to make consensual informed choices. We are born into a world with limited resources due to greed and misinformation and hyper exploitation of others and ourselves. I think that we spend so much time worrying about how can I XYZ versus where am I now? What am I doing currently? Like, can I be fully present in the moment, and can I slow down? I also think it's a lot of miscommunication and violent communication versus nonviolent communication. So we're not taught how to have crucial, critical conversations that are rooted in compassion and rooted in respect and mindfulness. And the skill of communicating is not taught to us. We are taught to like work to produce, to continue, to work to produce, to continue that cycle, rather than saying like, what do you want to see manifested in your life? What do you want to see manifested in your community? How can we get there? What's the journey to get there? Can you do it with support, or can you do it autonomously on your own? And I think we are so afraid to be seen as vulnerable. We're so afraid to be seen as weak, as broken, as flawed, as imperfect, and like as limitless beings, that we spend so much of our existence. And I contribute to this cycle. I am a part of this cycle, and I do this in my own life, is like, we just want to be the next thing, or to do, or to make it the next thing, rather than saying like, how are we now? What's going on with our bodies, with our community, with ourselves? And we're afraid to just be human and to mess up, so much so that we hypercorrect and we overproduce and overcommit. And I see myself doing that all the time, because I want to be seen as good, as perfect, as wanted, rather than saying like, I am good as I am. I want myself. I hope others want me too. I would love to share my gifts and my time with you. And like, do I have the capacity for that? There's a lot of privilege with what I just said. Like, that's not a privilege everybody gets. And I think that mental health and emotional health and sexual health and bodily health would be in a much better place if we took the time to just stop doing and just like stood still for a little bit and allow people to rest. I think that would contribute to a better mental health. And I think that what contributes to a continuation of deteriorating mental health is isolation, the ingrained obligation to be perfect, to be better, and then a lack of resources due to greed and overconsumption. So I would say, in a very like brief nutshell, that is that. Yeah.
No, awesome. Thank you so much, CP. So in another kind of in another direction. So for me, if I were not a therapist, not a social worker, or pursuing this field at all in any capacity, I would be a world traveler who blogs about the people, countries, and different cultural customs I encountered because I love exploring, connecting with people. So can you tell me, if you were not a therapist or in social work or any capacity, what would you be and why?
Woo, what would I be and why? I would have like many different lives. So one life I would live, I would love to be a professional opera singer. I am a trained opera singer and have performed before, and I would love to return to that life and that career. So I would return back into that community space and be an opera performer. I would love to be a chef, like an executive chef, and I think that would be amazing. I would also like to find myself being an oceanographer and studying sea life and the ocean. I think that that is both terrifying and really cool. And then I think another thing I would love to do is learn the art of photography, specifically film photography, and take that into humanitarian journalism and capture the souls of humans and the way that we live and the minutia of the world through a camera lens versus being in conversation with one another. So many different lives, many different things. I think that's what I really like to do. And then sometimes I would just like to be a hobbit and read in a hobbit hole. Just like drink tea and do really nothing but read and write. And so I can say like there's so many things I would love to do. I hope I get to do like at least a small portion of all of those before I like move into another season of my life after this one. And it's so exciting that there's just so much to do. I feel like there's not enough time, but like really, I just have to find the time to do it. So, or make the time to do it. But yeah, I think that's it. Like that's enough, right, Katrica? Like opera singer, chef, oceanographer. Like
Yeah,
that's plenty.
that's enough. That's
Plenty.
enough for a lifetime.
Oh,
So
yeah, so that's a great question. I also think that's really cool that you would be a travel blogger and want to capture people's stories in that way. I could see you doing that really well. Like you have a really great gift of connecting with people and making them feel really welcome. So I say do that and be a therapist. Like do it all. Like if you want.
why not? Thank you so much, Phoebe. Is there anything that I did not ask you that you wish I had?
Oh, let's see. I wish I would love to have the question of like what brings you to this work on days when you don't want to do it, because there are days that people don't want to be a therapist, I'm fairly certain, or seasons where we like feel stunted in this work, and what brings back this desire to do it. Because I think that's always interesting, is to learn about people's why and then how they can facilitate coming back into this work after a season of burnout or maybe loss or just of like stillness in their practice. So that would be great to hear. And I also know that we can have that conversation for a different time.
Can you tell us why though? Do you want to tell us why?
Yeah, sure. I would love to tell why, because I think that, well, for me, like I come back to it when I don't want to be there. Because I know that like for me, I've really needed someone, and I really looked forward to the time with my therapist, and someone showed up. Like someone showed up, and that's a part of the power of this skill, of this gift, of this craft, is that someone, all we need to do at times is just show up. And maybe for 45 to 60 minutes with a client or a group of clients, we just sit in silence, and that is the healing that needs to take place or that they crave. Sometimes it's just like laughing and crying and feeling all the emotions. But I come back to it because on days that I really needed a therapist and someone to just see me for me, that human gave me that gift. And I would like to be able to do that in the same way. To have that resource available for people if they want it. So for me, that's why I come back. And then I'm also honest with myself. There are some days when I'm like, this is hard work. I don't want to do this. I want to go to bed. And I still want to be that resource. I still want to hold that space so I can live in the both and I can move forward. And that's really like my why, is because it goes back to the question of why do you think we're leading, or like what's leading the cause of mental illness and emotional illnesses or health, is because there's a lack of resources. So if we can build a healthy capacity and keep that balance and sustain ourselves while admitting that this is hard work and some days we do need to stop and we don't need to see clients, like we can add to that resource of abundance that we are so worthy of having, that we are not always given when we come into this world. So that is my why. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much, CP, for that, for your transparency. I really appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you for being here with us as well.
Good.
And we appreciate you so much.
Thanks. I appreciate you. Like, thank you for this project. I'm so excited to hear the stories and shares from other people. And I celebrate you and thank you for the work of leading this and putting this together. This is super impactful and will really help us as clinicians getting to know each other better. And then it will also help people that we come in contact with within new and like whoever gets to see this. So thank you so much for facilitating and having me. I was really happy to support you and be a part of this. Yeah.
Thank you.